good morning. We are here, and it is Saturday, which means, especially judging by the engine noise, that we are here for Pilum Teaches DCS. This is, as usual, a official Pantheon Initiative training type scenario. And I will be going up to show you some specific things with the F-16C Fighting Falcon today, focusing on the AIM-120, the AIM-9 guns, and the joint helmet-mounted queuing system. So it should be a good trip, should be a good time. Let's go ahead and get into the jet, and we'll talk about some of what we're going to be doing today and what will need to be bound. Alright, so we've got our aircraft here today. We're of course carrying some extra fuel. And since we're going up just for the air-to-air duty, we're not carrying the cheek-mounted targeting pod, nor are we carrying the harm targeting system pod on either end of the cheek. We are armed with a total of 6 air-to-air missiles today on all the available air-to-air pylons. Starting from inboard to outboard, we have the AIM-9M Sidewinder, which we'll be using for showing some of the things that we can do without the helmet to kind of look around and look at things. Just outboard of that, we have the more advanced AIM-9X Sidewinder with its more advanced seeker head that you can kind of see there on display. It's a little glass container where you can kind of look all over the place for things. And on the wingtip station, we have the AIM-120C AMRAAM, the Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile. But just so we don't forget, we're also equipped with an M61A1 20mm Vulcan autocannon, mounted here in the wing root. The first thing we're going to cover is what all needs to be done to get things rocking and rolling. Obviously, we need to go ahead and turn on the helmet-mounted queuing system. Make sure that it is all nice and aligned and working and doing its thing. But the other thing that I like to pre-configure while we are on the ground, and it's important, we'll talk about that here in a little bit as we get up and take off, is to go ahead and do things like pre-configure our seeker heads. And you can hear the difference between the AIM-9X and the AIM-9M as far as its growl. Why that is important for this aircraft in particular is that it does remember what your settings were anytime you go back into an air-to-air mode. For example, if we were in air-to-ground master mode and we suddenly drop down into dogfight mode, it's going to go ahead and queue up our sidewinders, starting with the AIM-9M, because it's the most inboard, but if we go like with the outboard one there, we can look around with it. Because it will remember, and it'll remember what was queued up first. And when we come back out of dogfight mode, it will put us back in whatever mode we were in prior to going into dogfight mode. So it's very important that we have all of that set up ahead of time, so that if we get into a fight, we can very quickly have access to what we need, most likely, in that kind of an emergency situation. Good morning, Bestiary. Alright, let's go ahead and take off, and we'll talk about what we're doing today. We are using a different base than Nellis, because I do have some called-in air-to-air spawns that we can use for a few targets here at the air-to-air range northwest of Tonopah. So we will go ahead and take off, make our way out that direction, which is very close by, so we really don't need the fuel at all, but, you know, we're doing it for the purposes. The intention here is to go ahead and start with the medium-range missiles, and then work our way into the shorter range missiles, and eventually the gun. Because those are all important tools that we are going to need to be able to get up and do our job. We do have an AWACS on station that will be providing us with some data link information, and we'll be making good use of that data link situational awareness page to really kind of get the magic going. Go ahead and we'll turn COM 1 back on. Turn the volume down a little bit just in case he blows out our eardrums there. Some important things to keep in mind with the F-16 is that it is an Air Force aircraft, which means the front trigger is always the gun. It has no origins in Navy anything like the F-4, so none of that matters for it. And the gun is always armed if the rest of the missiles are armed, so if you need to quickly take a snapshot at somebody, it is possible to do so. In air-to-ground mode, the gun is not armed in that regard. Actually, that's not true. It is. You could select it pretty quick. But certain modes for air-to-ground will disable the gun because the front trigger will do other things like fire the laser on your targeting pod. But for air-to-air, it is always available. Missiles are fired through pressing the pickle button or missile release key, which is usually button 2 or under the thumb for most regular HOTASs. We're a little heavy with 11,000 pounds of gas, so it's going to take us a little longer to get up off the ground. And I'm just going to give us a nice little attitude hold here for a moment while we kind of climb in orbit. And we'll turn our lights out. So our main focus for this one is going to be outside the cockpit and with this display here that I have on my left MFD. That is currently the sensor of interest as indicated by the white box all the way around the MFD display. This is our air-to-air radar setting. On the left-hand side, we have our elevation control with the little T indicating where it's at relative to the center line. We have our search angle in tens of degrees, so it's a 60-degree cone forward, 30-degree cone forward, 10-degree cone forward. And we have our bar scans, 1-bar scan, 2-bar scan, 4-bar scan. And what that basically means is every time this radar sweeps left and right on the bottom, you can see by the little T bouncing back and forth there. As it reaches the end and begins a path back, you will see that the elevation changes slightly to conduct a search in that area. So a 4-bar scan will scan 4 separate scan lines worth of airspace, whereas a 1-bar scan is just right where we have the radar set to. While this is extremely quick within its single band because it is constantly scanning the same environment, it really doesn't get us anything in the way of a good search. So if we're actually out here looking for targets with our own radar without any kind of AWACS support, that can be a bit of a pain. As we are entirely reliant upon having happenstance pointing our radar in the right direction to look for something. On the outer end, we have our range scale, which will also change with our HSD display. You can see kind of the large cone that we got going on there. We can scan out to 160 miles, but keep in mind that smaller fighter-sized targets are not going to show up as readily in that kind of a scan. The default setting, initially at least, is 40 nautical miles, and it can go all the way down to 5 nautical miles for a close-in sort of view. We can use the little tracking bug there while it is soy to just move it off to the left or right hand side of the screen, which will also change its scan from a 30-degree field of view to the 60-degree field of view. If for whatever reason you need to go tighter, you can. We can use TMS to press to get an expanded view, indicated by the little expanded icon lighting up like that. And what that will allow you to do is hopefully pick out targets that are close together. Like we got these little radar tracks over here, but if we go in expanded view, you can see where they separate out a little more in the hopes that you can lock on to more than one target for a track while scan launch. The default scan pattern here on this one is a range while scan. But as you designate a target, we're about to do here, go TMS up, goes into a track while scan mode, which still allows you to move the heading or the designating bug around. And if you do TMS up twice on the same target, it will put you in a single target track. Let's go ahead and call up some friends. And we're going to go with an air-to-air hard 2 ship because we've got our AMRAAMs on board. It'll be our start. So somewhere out here in this air-to-air range is going to be our 2 new targets. And we will try and take them with the radar and longer range missiles. And we'll talk a little bit about HUD symbology and all of that fun stuff as we get rolling.
Overlord 1-1 in field 2. Request bogey dope. In field 2, Overlord 1-1. Bra 314 460 at 23,000 knots.
1-4 for 60. I think some of my issue with my display here is the actual year that the current mission is set to. Alright, so we're actually going to pause here for a moment because when you're ever working with an AWACS, what's being displayed here in this corner, and when they call out that they're doing bra for you, it's not that they're asking for your support, although in a way they are providing support for you. Welcome back, Dark Hero. What it is an acronym, and it's just telling you how it is giving you information. This is bearing, range, and altitude. Sometimes bra is spelled with an additional A to include the word aspect, which they are giving you anyway. But what it is it's going to be a bearing from you, a range from you in nautical miles, angels, and aspect, whether it is hot, flanking, or cold. So in this particular instance, we are looking at a target that is compass bearing 312 right now, this moment, because understand it's in motion 2, and if they're moving quick or if they're moving, super oblique to you, they could quickly roll through a good handful of degrees as you come bringing the nose around to try and track your target. They're 60 miles away, 23,000 feet, and their nose is currently pointing at us, which is a nose hot condition. So they are somewhere between either moving towards us directly or in some other generally forward type scenario. It's hard for the AWACS to tell exactly where somebody is moving like that. They can really just kind of tell that by what direction the blip is moving on their radar as they're moving around. But it does tell us a few things right away. First off, we need to turn a little bit further to the left as we're currently on a bearing of 354, which is almost north. And because they're 60 miles away, our little 40-mile scan here is not going to cut it for trying to pick out our targets. And since they are at 23,000 feet, they are also higher elevation than us, which on the surface sounds like, oh man, that's kind of awful. We're a little low. We got to pick our nose up and get going. Yes and no. On the one hand, you do get some greater range by having an altitude advantage over your target, and you can, store up the old energy bottle there with potential energy by being higher than your target. So as you dive down, you pick that energy back up without expending too much gas. But at the same time, especially in older aircraft, not like the F-16, but more like the F-4, looking up at your target is better than looking down because you don't suffer from looking at the, reflections of a ground radar return to hide your target. it makes it a little easier to, identify that particular target. So where you want to be to start an engagement is really kind of situational based on your aircraft, what weapons you're carrying, what you've got available, how many wingmen you have optional to you. A lot of different factors kind of play into where you should be versus where you are. But in this particular instance, I'm probably going to maintain about the same altitude for now, at least until I get the targets locked up, and then we may go ahead and try and climb to get a little bit of a range advantage over them. But there are a couple of other things that we got going on here too. The first one is we still got bags on board the jet. And with that extra weight, while we do have a lot of extra fuel, it does make us a lot less maneuverable. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Pilum, they're 60 miles away, my guy. Like there's no possible way that this could get down into a knife fight very quickly. It can. And if you're not prepared for it in advance, it will. We do have every potential chance, especially here, because the default setting for the mission that I'm on is a 1975 style training yard. So we are way overmatched for anything that I would put out here. But more to the issue, therefore, is that even in a situation like that, it is possible for the enemy aircraft to fly in such a way to make our AMRAAMs useless. And what do I got left? Sidewinders and a gun. It's gonna have to get into a dogfight. It's gonna have to be that kind of closeness. So there's a few things to keep in mind while you are up here doing air-to-air. First is to monitor your fuel status. Right now I've got 12,000 pounds in the tank because we came up with 3 bags, and I definitely didn't need it for just taking off of Tonopah, so I'm kind of doing it for the example. But as you go ahead and burn through that fuel, it's important to go ahead and use your selective jettison and get rid of the things you don't need on the aircraft anymore. Whether it's an empty centerline fuel tank, because that's all you took up, and now you're under 7,000 pounds in the jet, so you're definitely on internal fuel and not using the external. If it's empty and you don't need it, you can get rid of it if you're preparing for a fight. If you're simulating something, akin to real life where you wouldn't want to get rid of that on account of, I need to bring this home because taxpayer dollars are important, then yeah, you can go ahead and hang on to it until you absolutely cannot. But you can go through and you can select the individual pylons by pressing the little buttons nearest their position, and it will get rid of stores first and then racks if applicable. The other way that we can get rid of things very quickly is to use the emergency stores jettison button. Now, this is a little different than selective jettison because it will dump just about everything off the jet. 297. We're going to be kind of out here using the elevator controls there on my little axis to try and search for them while we're doing this. But the important thing about the E-Jet, as we pause here again and come out to take a look at the aircraft, is it is going to jump everything off the jet that has an explosive pylon at the pylon level. Now, what the hell does that mean, Pilum? Well, what it means is if you're carrying a rack of Mavericks or a rack of bombs, and you've got multiple bombs on the pylon, it's going to just separate the pylon from the aircraft to get rid of it. There are some things that it won't get rid of because those pylons don't have explosive bolts or anything else associated with them, like ECM pods or the air-to-air missiles. Those will all typically stay on board the jet. So if it's a matter of, I've got 3 fuel tanks on and I don't want to go through the extra button press of hitting selective jettison and selecting my individual pylons and making sure that's all good and then hitting the pickle button to get rid of it, you can just hit the E-Jet to dump all of it and then immediately hit your switch to go from Category 3 to Category 1 stores configuration, which will give you the full G-load for the jet. Because right now we are a little more limited. So for now, let's go ahead and unpause. We're going to go ahead and use selective jettison for now. Got our 3 pylons set up. The master arm is on. Pickle. Off they go. They are gone. Go to Stores 1 category configuration. Hit SJ again to get out of selective jettison. and we are a little more fighting trim right now. However, we are also down to 7,000 pounds of gas. I'm going to check in with the AWACS again, see if we can find out where our bandits are hiding, because I do want to take them from as far away as possible, if possible. 283 for 45 miles, 23,000. $15,000 feet. No, there's no other targets out here. That's probably a false echo. Go and put it on the roof here. Climb a little bit. A little closer to co-altitude now. And there's our bandits, 22 and 23,000 feet. They are a little too close together for me to kind of sort them into individuals, but we do have some good information. Now, as we come up here and we look out with our helmet, that little swirling effect there is the radar attempting to grab onto it, because they are flying abeam to our position at the moment. Something to understand a little bit about pulse Doppler radars, and I'm not going to get into like a full lecture on those kinds of things because that's super unnecessary for DCS. But broadly speaking, with a pulse Doppler radar system, what it does to try and filter out, I'll pause this here before we get too close, what it does to try and filter out ground returns, false echoes, everything like that, that you kind of get as raw data on the F4. If you've watched any of the F4 videos I've done, you can really see that. What it does is it looks for what is flying at the same speed of the aircraft, because that must be the ground. So if you have an aircraft that is cold to you and you're both traveling at almost exactly the same speed, plus or minus about 100 knots, depending upon how big your filter is that's built into the jet, your radar will lose them because it will look at it and go, well, clearly that's the ground. That's not a target that I'm supposed to be locking, and it will just drop the contact. So sometimes when you're playing DCS and you're like, oh, I don't understand, I had such a good radar lock and everything else, it's, well, they fell into the filter flying defensively from whatever it is you've shot on purpose to get your radar to drop the track. And in the F-16, you can see that that's happening, and you'll need to do something about it super quick before you completely lose the lock, when that little square that indicates a contact that's been locked up begins to swirl around as it's desperately trying to find whatever it was that was under the scanner before. You know, whether it is you've got to speed up really quickly and kind of go into afterburner, or if you got to try and slow things down so that the filter, you know, expands back into its proper range. All of those things are options that you can do to try and you know, keep track of your target. Otherwise, it's a matter of you're going to need to basically look at the target and hang on to it, because if they're flying in that such a fashion and you are that close, you might have to kind of carry it on your own until the radar can hook them up again. But in this case, we have our target. It's got a little circle around it on the map. If they were separated enough, you could take the steering bug, move it over to the next target, and do a single tap of TMS up. And that will put you in a TWIS mode, which is track while scan, which will allow multiple launches of missiles at multiple targets. You can cycle between those targets with TMS right once you have more than one selected. In this case, they are flying in a very, very close formation, so most likely what we'll end up doing is if I hit TMS up again, it's just going to, you know, put the first target in single target track, which is less helpful. However, just like the F4 and many other aircraft, we have our little circle, which tells us the current engagement reach of the AMRAAM, and it will expand as we get closer. This little circle out here is the intercept dot, which is a little larger, a little more obvious on the F-16 than it is in most other aircraft. It tends to just be a single dot in a lot of others. On the right-hand side of the HUD, we have our closure rate in knots and the range caret. We also have our little flagpole here that is going to indicate maximum range at the top and the no escape range within the bracket. When we shoot, there's going to be an indicator that will show up in the bottom right-hand corner of the HUD that will start counting down. And for the AMRAAM, that is seconds until the seeker head activates on its own, when it reaches that point that people call pitbull for, which is the weapon has turned on its own radar, it is conducting terminal engagement on its own, and it no longer needs any help from you. So for now, we're going to go ahead and unpause, and we're going to attempt to shoot down these two aircraft from not quite as far away as possible, but certainly beyond visual range if we can help it. And if we can't, then we're going to have to just get into the knife fight, and that's going to be the way that it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and throttle up, because speed and energy is important for the missile as it is for me. Tell they're kind of tracking to our left here because our intercept dot is way out here. But we're going to go ahead and fly the best intercept we can. See, our closure rate is increasing. Over 1,000 knots closure rate now, and as we get to maximum range, our AMRAAM is saying, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I can get that. That caret is really coming down fast. Oop. And our targets here have separated, so I'm going to go ahead and try for a Twiz launch on both of those. We'll see how that one works. I'm going to go and unpause quickly. Nope, still too close. Nope, we're not going to risk it. All right, Fox 3. First one's off the jet. And I'm going to roll out right here defensive. I'm going to try and keep him in the gimbals of the seeker, or the radar rather. So I'm still providing information for as long as I can. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn completely away from our targets for a moment. Here's our AMRAAM, which I may have had to let go of him a little too early. Just fine, it happens. That's why we got two of them. Targets are a lot closer. Fox 3. And Splash Bandit. Alright, we're going to go up with our AIM-9Xs next. And I'm going to pause. Because we're going to talk a little bit about the helmet and auto acquisition. He may not actually be dead, because he's still kicking out flares like he's still in the fight. But that'll be fine. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hit my dogfight mode and TMS up to turn the radar on. And let's go ahead and look for our bandit here. I'm going to hit TMS up again because it's going to give me this little circle. And at this point, I just have to put the circle over the bandit. Uncage the seeker head. We got high tone. Fox 2. AIM-9X is going out to kill him. And he's done. $177 for 3. Let's go ahead and come out of dogfight mode. Where is his friend?
Overlord 1-1. Dope.
The M9X in bore sight. Get this super quick because it's close. But here on the right MFD here with the SMS page up, we have our AIM-9X selected and it is in bore sight mode. If you hit that to slave, it will lock it forward or slave it to the radar. But in bore, you can actually look around with the helmet, and if you find something, even if you don't have a radar lock on it, you can just uncage the seeker head and it will go ham and do what it needs to do. Box 2. Nope. He hit me and ours went into the flares. That's all right. Be a good execution of these things if we just got everything right all the time. Process was good. He just defeated it with flares and unfortunately throttling my engine, which is pulling the throttles all the way back because it's a heat seeker he shot at me. And dispensing chaff and flares with the dispenser was not enough to defeat his weapon. But that's fine. Can just restart real quick. Be back up in the air in a moment. And carry on again. One of the first rules of getting into a fight at all anywhere in DCS is sometimes it is possible to do everything correctly and still lose. Sometimes that just happens. Alright, so while that's aligning, we're just going to go ahead and quickly line our helmet. Set up our radio. Place a call out to our friends again.
Overlord 1-1, passing waypoint 1 at 28,000. Overlord 1-1, on station at bullseye 3244 130 at 28,000.
Waiting on alignment. It's complete.
Enfield 2, Overlord 1-1, Bra 317 450 at 23,000 knots.
Okay, now I'm actually getting all the data link back or information there. I think I might have spawned too quickly with it. That might have been the problem. Before the AWACS was up, so it wasn't automatically configuring all that stuff for me like it should. It should be good. The SMS page will help us out and show us another handy feature of this helmet that is especially useful in a combat situation. But for now, let's go ahead and take off. Up, you beastie. There we go. Alright, so I've made my HSD the soy, and I'm just going to wander over here with my little crosshair and hit TMS up. And for this, I'm actually going to wait for a moment. Let's give this a moment here. Go ahead and keep climbing out for a moment. Alright, so for those of you that are watching on YouTube later, or, you know, as a subscriber, you don't have the ads, I've hit TMS up while just selecting this target here, and now I have this little dotted line with a D31 on it. And if I look out here with my helmet, I can see that the altitude of my selected target is present, 23, and I have a circle around it. In the case of friendly contacts, what that will display is their actual true position, because you're constantly transmitting, you know, where you are, what you're doing, that kind of thing, through the data link. But for enemy contacts, it will kind of update along on its own, and it will lag behind a few seconds based on, you know, other sensors that are finding the aircraft and then transmitting it along the data link. But what it does mean is that if I was coming up here without my radar on and just relying on the data link as a receptor, you know, we could very easily get out here and find a target and stalk it while we were closing distance. Now, understandably, sometimes targets will disappear because the AWACS can't see it, or you can't see it, or the information hasn't come through on the data link page, which is why sometimes the SA page can lag behind and you might lose the target. But as soon as you pick them up, you can come right back to the HSD, select it with the crosshair, TMS up, and then you will have your little circle there to let you know where he's at until you lock him with the radar. Okay, so let's try and get these guys here. Now they're turning cold. You can see the or at least the bandit I was locking onto turned cold. But his friend has just made it super easy for me to potentially get both of them. Closure rate of 1,240 knots. There we go. I've got them both set up for Twiz. You can see it bounce back and forth. We will take a shot with both weapons. We're close all the way to the no escape range. Box 3. Box 3. No! Alright, yeah, he shot me close. I was locked on or paying attention to the wrong target. That said, AMRAAM was well within reach. So we will trade. 1 and 2. Or 1 rather. Got the first one. We're just having a day of it here. But we've shown the radar off, so we'll do another quick restart of the jet. And we'll go up and we'll take on our guns targets there. I saw the plume of the missile launch a little bit too late, which is my fault. As he was kind of chilling out there right off the nose, and I was making him the hottest, easiest target to find. All right, let's go ahead and call in the air-to-air easy guns. And we'll go up and smack one of them with a missile so we can come up and use the gun on the other one. Same as before, just going to go ahead and get our helmet situated. Set our low altitude warning. Something a little more reasonable for where we are.
Overlord 1-1 on station at bullseye 324 for 130 at 28,000.
Now the AIM-9M can be used in conjunction with the helmet a little bit, but you can see its seeker head is not quite as robust as the 9.
Overlord 1-1 Bra 307 430 at 15,000 gold.
Things to keep in mind there with that. That said, the alignment's complete, so we will go ahead and skyrocket up to a good altitude and go party with our friends. That said, we can go ahead and use this data link to put a circle on them. And we can already see where they are by virtue of our AWACS that is looking at them for us. You don't have to lock just unfriendlies with that. You can lock friendlies with it too, like a wingman or something similar. So you'll always have a dotted line to indicate who is who, which could be helpful if you set it up in advance ahead of a fight. I'll put him in single target track, which will lose my situational awareness for anything else around the aircraft, and it will trigger his RWR. So things to keep in mind if you're doing anything PvP related or the enemy is responsive to things like that, like suddenly being put into an SDT track and being very, very much aware of your presence and intentions. And we will even the odds, and then we will get into the gunfight. And I'm just going to shoot 2 missiles at him, not because I should, because you definitely shouldn't. And it's bad juju to double stuff an AMRAAM, especially on the same target. Alright, so now we're here, and we've definitely got a fight on our hands. We're going to go ahead and pause, because what we're going to do first is talk about the dogfight control, which is your dogfight center, your missile override switches there. Dogfight or go back to center is the fun one there for this one. It will immediately put us into this dogfight mode. What's important about it is that it does turn the radar off, so you'll need to use TMS up to put the radar back on again, but it does give us several bits of information at the moment, just right out the gate. It will tell us that we are in dogfight mode. It will show the range gate, airspeed. It really declutters a lot of the information here. I've already got him in STT mode, so it looks like the radar is still activated in this particular moment, but it will immediately drop you right into your short-range missiles if you have them on board the jet. And you can see this gun funnel and our little line here to indicate, where we need to be in order to shoot. Just like the gun pipper for air to ground, there's also a little circle with a little tick mark that will slowly wind down and turn into a double circle as we get into range. All good indicators about where you need to be in order to successfully engage your target. But let's go ahead and unpause. We're going to hit our E-jet to get rid of all of the other crap on the jet, and then we will prosecute this fight against this MiG-19. We're up Category 1. Now, there is an auto acquisition cross, and you can steer it. So if you see your target and they're like, oh no, he's right here, he's now acquired. And we've only got a closure rate of 180 knots, so he's flying away from me right now. Try not to force the overshoot. Take my eyes off of him for a minute.
Enfield 2, Overlord 1-1, pop-up group 03141 at 7,000 knots.
Now the insane part is that I could shoot him with an AIM 9X from that position. But I want to try and close for the guns kill, if we can. The radar says we're in range. Down he goes. Hopefully. He's at least hurt. But we're not just going to assume that until he rolls down into the ground. Going, gone. The F-16 is also one of a handful of aircraft which can mount a SAP round, the semi-armor piercing high explosive incendiary, that doesn't have tracers associated with them. So you really have to kind of be up and up on your game there for knowing where to aim. Which is mostly a matter of trying to slide the jet down your funnel till about the wingtips touch either end of the funnel, and then that should be good parameters. You do have the added benefits of getting an extra cross and a lead indicator in the F-16, but broadly that's how those funnels work, is wingtips touching either end of the funnel looks like it should be good parameters. You should be able to pull the trigger and score a hit. It doesn't take very much to knock down an aircraft. Channel 77 for home. You know, and especially with some aircraft, if you're carrying a much heavier autocannon, that can all be over very quickly with just a couple of rounds of ammunition. The 20s that we've got on most of the American fighters, or the 25mm equalizer on the Harrier, and I suppose the F-35, but I'm not going to talk about that in DCS because that's a different subject. Yeah, the heavier autocannon rounds can really punch through something, and it's important to note that a lot of the Soviet aircraft, especially the more modern jet fighters, use a 30mm autocannon, and while they carry much fewer rounds, those rounds are bigger, more explosive, and cause more pain and punishment round for round than yours do in the F-16. Broadly speaking, the big things when you get into a dogfight is to try and keep your eyes on the target, try and maintain your situational awareness, but at the same time also follow one of the first rules of flying, which is always fly the jet. That one can be a little hard, especially once the fangs come out, and I know that. I'm guilty of that from time to time. And you'll lose track of where you are relative to the ground, and all of a sudden you find yourself, you know, face first in the desert sand. Especially someplace like here on Tonopah, where you can see that my barometric altitude is reading 17,400 feet. Tonopah is actually up 5,000 feet elevation, so my radar altimeter is telling me I'm actually only 12,000 feet off the deck. So I'm much closer to the ground than my mean sea level barometric altimeter would tell me. Again, just covering some of the basics there with dogfight mode. It is always going to put you back in whatever mode you were in prior to things happening. So it's very much something that if you are in an air-to-ground mode and you're up here and you've got bombs on board the jet, and I'm going to come up and drop some snake eyes or 82s or throw a JDAM or something at a target, and all of a sudden, oh holy crap, and here comes a MiG-29 at Mach Snot just rolled over the top of my aircraft. You don't want to necessarily just punch the stores right away if he's not coming after you and he's going after somebody else, but you can immediately go into dogfight mode, and especially with something like a 9X, get the auto-ac radar circle up, lock him up, uncage the seeker, and shoot. All in a very rapid order of succession, and then just drop right out of dogfight mode and go right back to where you were, ready to drop bombs again. There was a point when we were flying on the Styx mission that I had built with some of the other folks in PI. I had an F-14 roll in over the top of me, and he was getting engaged. Yet he wasn't tracking me necessarily as a target, but I had to go up to meet him because it's an F-14. I can't just ignore that for a minute. Pulled the nose up. I took a shot at it with guns and didn't hit him, and he was immediately destroyed by an E-90's missile that he had fired at that aircraft, which was good. But I just completed the loop, dropped out of dogfight mode, and then immediately dropped a pair of Mark 82s successfully over the top of an artillery battery that I was trying to get up there to kill that was attacking our base at Kurt Shimona. And that all took place maybe over 15 seconds. So it's a very powerful mode to get to know and to get familiar with, and to know when it's important to use it and when it isn't. When you're fighting the BVR battle at 40 nautical miles, you've got all the time in the world to really kind of settle in and figure out what it is you want to do and how. I say you have all the time in the world. That's not actually super true. Sometimes you really don't, as 40 miles can become a knife fight extremely quickly. But you've at least got a little bit of standoff distance where you can manipulate your pages a little bit. Go, do I think I'm going to get into a fight? Are my fuel tanks actually empty? Do I need to get rid of them? Okay, I'll use the selective jettison to do that, and maybe clear out the bomb racks and everything else too, because those take up weight and cause aerodynamic drag. Not as much as having, weapons and the pylons on, but if you can get rid of them, why not? Every little bit helps. Because from the moment that we got into that gunfight and threw off our bags, just in that short engagement, we already burned through half the fuel on the jet. We're down to about 4,000 pounds. Getting into a dogfight is probably one of the most intensive things you can do, second for second, once you get into a fight. But it's certainly one of the most demanding on the fuel, as you're going to be spending a lot of time on higher thrust settings, possibly in full afterburner. You could be at low altitude, and then high altitude, and then low altitude again. It is a mess by design. If I was up here doing anything meaningful for a cap tasking, like actually just up here protecting other jets, after a fight like that, it might be time to go ahead and go, you know what, I'm going to go off station and go hit a tanker and pick up another 3,000 pounds of gas. For no other reason than getting into another fight like that might mean I don't get home and I can't get to a tanker, depending upon how long they last. And as always, you know, DCS is a simulator that if you're flying it right and doing everything, there's a lot of points on it that are going to be a little bit slower, as we've seen on the channel. You folks have seen that, where we've just had long cruises punctuated by moments of intense terror as, you know, all hell's breaking loose and you're fighting the fight. And a little kiss of the wheels. Hold the nose up here. And use the wings to brake a bit. As far as fighting that engagement without the helmet-mounted sight, it's more or less the same. You know, your dogfight mode and everything else, it does lose the ability to steer the seeker head with your eyes, but you can use the radar to manually lock up a target, or, you know, use the auto acquisition mode to lock up a target as you fly it through the crosshairs, and then use your cage uncage, which I'm actually going to hit that button here, the uncage switch, very important. Because you don't, if you can, you don't want to shoot the missile in that low tone before it fully acquires. You want to get that nice high-pitched, you know, whine of, I'm pretty sure I can kill that one, boss. And then send it. And then also pay attention to things like, is the sun behind your target? Because an infrared missile will love to go after the sun, even though it's 93 million miles away. Or, you know, is my target dispensing so many flares? Either wait till they've kicked too many of those out, or they don't seem to be paying attention, and then give them the beans. And it's important too, especially in even in an agility fighter that's used to turning and likes to turn, that speed and energy are important, and keeping and knowing when to spend that energy is the difference between getting a kill and, you know, not paying attention to it and ending up like we did a couple of times today. There's an ad that's starting up here in about 50 seconds. At least that's what the Twitch is telling me. We are going to put a pin in the F-16 here for now, but there's an extra thing here because I'll need about 2 minutes to get set back up again. We're going to do more Pilum Teaches DCS with the F-15E Strike Eagle in a nearly 0-0 environment using the air-to-ground radar going through startup and everything else. So we'll actually spend some time in the Strike Eagle to have some fun there in my favorite office of all time. So we're going to have a short break here before we get back into that. So stick around, folks, and we shall return very shortly. If this is where I lose you for the rest of the afternoon or the day or whatever, we'll just go through our usual thing here of displaying what we got going on for the week. For other things on the stream. Monday, of course, we have DCS Monday, 6 p.m. Going to be just going up, doing some general flying, that kind of deal. Classic games at 9 p.m. We'll be playing Novologic's 1990s Wolfpack, which will be fun. Arma 3 on Friday, and Pilum teaches DCS next week. We'll be doing some more things with the F-16, and maybe continue with doing 2 jets, depending upon how today works out. So sit tight, folks. Going to be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll be starting up again with the F-15. But I will close the streams, get a nice sharp clip there for that for posting the video, and then we will roll into the next phase of everything here. So bear with me. We'll be right back.